All right, welcome to another episode of Inside Hollywood with Vinny. Today, we're talking to a filmmaker who isn't waiting for permission to break into the industry, much like myself. At just 19 years old, my guest has already racked up 25, yes, you heard it right, 25 short films and one feature. And he's currently in the middle of a massive pre-production hustle for a second feature, Storytellers. We're going to dive into the reality of independent filmmaker at such a young age and why he chose to pair his creative passion with his business degree rather than traditional film school, and how he's navigating through the process of script to financing and everything in between. So, everyone, let's give a warm welcome to director, producer, all the way from Canada, Augustin Sasarman. Welcome to the show, Augustin. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on. This is really great.
It's my pleasure. And as we spoke about earlier, I like to have all kinds of people, creative people on the show, whether you're somebody who's done it all or someone who's just cutting their teeth. And I particularly love the ones like yourself who are young and just starting out and looking to make a path for themselves. So it really is my pleasure.
Thank you. Well, it's just at the beginning of it all. One day I hope to be where you're at, but baby steps.
Where am I? But hey, listen, it's all part. We all have an individual journey, and we have a bunch of stuff that it's like a calling, man. I'm sure you feel it already. But I love it that you're at such a young age, and you have the world at your fingertips. I know it's a cliche, but you really do. So, before all the responsibilities come about, now's the time to really make it happen. So, I'm really excited for you. But let's get into again 25 short films. I mean, that's incredible. Tell us about that. How'd you do all that?
Yeah, so I trace that back to something that has nothing to do with filmmaking. I started out before I wanted to be a filmmaker. I was a high performance athlete. Me and my younger brother were the top sailors for our boat class in Canada. So I bring that up because we learned that kind of attitude of we didn't like sailing much, but we got that attitude of just working hard every day, knowing that we're going to love doing well at the races, at the tournaments. And so I kind of got that. I brought that attitude onto filmmaking. The moment I decided I was going to be a filmmaker, to put the work in to try to improve as fast as I could. So really, I never made a short film for fun. It was all basically um, training, is how I approached it.
I can certainly identify because my short film, Washington Avenue, by the way, on YouTube, it's free if you want to watch it. It's and then I wanted to learn everything about the business as much as I could. Not that you're going to learn everything, but I wanted to learn as much as I could and experience and all the problems. I wanted to get all the problems out of the way and get the experience. And it turned out being great. And again, 12 film festivals we won, which is incredible. But the point was, I wanted to get that kind of experience. And yeah, and we keep honing our craft, so to speak.
Absolutely. And that one of the big things for me was, like you said, there is no better way to learn than to actually do it, which is one of the reasons why I also decided to make my decision of studying business instead of going to film school. That's a separate thing, but I really believe that just actually making the films was the best way to learn. So I watched a couple YouTube videos, studied a few of my favorite movies, and then kind of went off to the races from there. So from when I was 12 years old, which is when I decided I was going to be a director, until last year, or I guess this year, I've made those 25 short films, and then progressively getting harder, and then transitioning into the features eventually.
That's great. Challenge yourself, right? I'm sure with every subsequent short film, you kind of do something, you stretch your boundaries a little bit, and you try to improve upon what you did before.
Absolutely. One of the big things was every short film was getting longer.
Good. And you know what? Step just build your resume, and you can, if you feel confident with some of them, you can even put together a night where you sell some tickets and get everybody together, and maybe do a fundraising. Give me some fundraising ideas here, folks. I do consulting too, by the way. I do consulting.
Yeah, not for free
but
though, not for free.
but you don't need my help because I mean you're on your way now. Right now, you're currently raising money for storytelling. You're almost there. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah,
Storyteller,
so
excuse me.
Storytellers is my upcoming feature film. It's my second feature film. It's the big project I've been working on for about a year now. We're going into production August 24th. So the last two big steps of the process is raising the funds. Everything is ready, and one of the big things was let's get the money to do this thing. So launched a crowdfunding campaign in parallel to reaching out to investors and whatnot, but the crowdfunding campaign seems to be doing really well. So we're at 80% funded. We're getting really close to 100%. If we hit 100%, then we can go into production guaranteed. Casting call just went out today. We're good to go. So yeah, it's the final sprint right now.
Well, you got a lot of really great actors and actresses up there in Canada. You have been speaking more and more with a lot of the players up there, and I love them. I think it's just an amazing thing what's going on. I mean, again, I had this conversation with another person from up there, Justin Levine, who is from Wingman. He's a producer on Wingman, which is a great new movie with Jamie Kennedy and Harlan Williams. And he, another Canadian guy who's, again, it's not just Hollywood is just now sort of everywhere, whether it's in Canada, Georgia, New York, Philly, especially Jersey. Jersey's building up these studios. So
Mm.
now let's go back to how you kind of progressed when you're doing the short films now and you're learning and you know maybe for some of the people out there that are just starting out, how were you able to assemble a crew and pay for it?
Yeah, so that's because I actually hired my first crew member ever for this feature film I'm working on right now. I was just always a big believer that as a director, I wanted to train my cinematography, which I could do with myself and my phone, and my storytelling, which I, just needed the phone for, and one of my brothers to act in my little films, or some of my school friends or whatever. So everything that I wanted to train, I could really do with basically nothing. And so finally, when I decided to make my next feature film, I decided I felt I was good enough as a director, and I wanted to really tackle a film with, great production value and thinking about the business side of things a lot. And that's always been a part of my thinking. I've always been very long-term focused. They were always just shot on the phone I use every day and using friends and family.
Just goes to the point that I say all the time is that we have an amazing amount of technology out there. We have our phones. I mean, it's crazy that the kind of technology that you don't really need much if you're creative and you kind of get schooled a little bit. And hey, listen, YouTube's a great place, a great resource to find out what's going on. We're on YouTube, by the way. Make sure you subscribe to my channel out there. And and I use it a lot too. I mean, I get my advice from everywhere, anywhere. That's valuable. So now going back to Storytellers. So here we are. We're 80% funded. How many days shoot is this looking like? What's your time frame?
So this one's, yeah, I'm excited to hear your reaction. So we're shooting this thing in 10 days. It's around a 2-hour movie. It's a quick shoot, but that's one of the big things that I wanted to learn. I forgot to mention this part. There were a few big things, but two of the biggest things I wanted to learn from all these short films was where I realized just how much waste is in the industry. I mean, the amount of time and money wasted on these big projects could feed a whole country, with the amount of resources lost for a year. And it's there's a couple times where I've seen that firsthand, and I knew from right from the beginning that I would work on being very efficient with not only with resources but also with time and getting 3 shots. That's impossible for me. So one of the big things I learned making all these short films was I've got this story I want to make. I kind of know what's going on. Let's do it as quick as possible, not get any coverage, none of that. And I approached the same way with my first feature film. Um, I'm finally ready with Storytellers, where I know exactly, I'm not shooting any coverage. I know exactly what I need. I'm aiming to achieve so much with so little, is because I know exactly how to allocate every resource to get the maximum out of the minimum, basically. We're shooting this whole thing in 10 days. It's going to happen, but I've had a lot of people tell me that, I'm out of my mind. But I guess we'll check in on that in about a month or so. And then after that, it's post production, and then on to the festivals and all that.
That's great. I love it, man. I'm excited for it. And I know what you mean. I mean, you go there and you say, geez, keep your fingers crossed because anything and everything will go wrong.
Yeah.
To make a movie is not easy, very chaotic, even though no matter how organized you are, you can't predict what could happen, whether it's the weather, whether you're in a location and the electric goes, so many different factors. Things are just
Yeah.
chaotic.
Yeah.
But being prepared and making sure you have your bases covered is. And I would say too that if you're writing, or even if you're not writing, but in a lot of my work, I make sure that as I'm writing the screenplay, I try to cut out or eliminate. I know what's going to be wasteful or like frivolous that you don't need. That attention to detail in your story, make sure that, there's that business component, there's that time component. Maybe you can only shoot 7 pages in one day. There's a whole science behind it, but
Yeah.
it's a labor of love. So tell us about some of those experiences that you've learned over this last few years of you doing this.
There haven't the biggest challenges I faced by far are the challenges I faced with Storytellers with this upcoming feature film. They're now that I'm dealing with, large amounts of money and team, and there have been some big challenges. Nothing much could go too wrong. It was really just a question of, yeah, nothing much could go too. I mean, nothing can go too wrong when you're making a movie with your friends and family. Nothing can go too wrong with that. But yeah, to be honest, I can't really think of any time where anything has gone very badly. If we have another chat in about a month or two, I think I'll be able to talk for days about all the stuff that 180'd on me during this production.
When we check back in with you, you're gonna have white hairs like me pretty soon. You're gonna get
Yeah,
those.
I'll have no more hair.
Like, Augustine, is that you? What happened to
Yeah, absolutely.
you? Well, listen, that's good stuff, man. And I wish you luck. I think it'll be fun. It comes down to having a great crew. Let's face it. It comes
Oh,
down to
yeah.
making sure you have a lot of great people around you that got your back.
And you know what? I'm so glad you bring that up because the one of the big things that people don't understand, um, I've had a producer read my script, and I was interested in bringing him on, and he said, "Sorry, I can't do this for less than 2 million." And I was like, "All right, thank you. I'll find somebody else who's as crazy as me." And I eventually did. But the whole idea is those people, I think, who they don't consider the human capital. Exactly like how you said. I can name, I mean, all my team members are bringing on tens of thousands in value from the relationships they have, the team members they bring on, the free resources they get, the favors they get. I mean, if you get the right team, then I mean, you can kind of do anything. And if you find people who have the same vision as you, then that's a really strong combination. So that's really I'm really blessed with the team I have because that's where a lot of that hidden cash is. You absolutely got it right. It's all about the human capital.
Without a doubt. No, I mean, those are people that I was blessed with some great people around me that they continue to support me, and they're invaluable.
Yeah,
Not enough money to pay for those type of people.
absolutely.
But we're now, once we get this done, I got a feeling you're going to do just fine. You can do great. And we're going to be talking about that. We'll do a follow up, of course. I would love to. But where do you see yourself? Where do you want to see yourself in the next 5, say 10 years? Where you want to be?
Well, I think short term, the goal is I think it's easy to be seen as a filmmaker who does short films, goes back and forth, and goes back to their job and comes back. I'm just fully doing feature films. Short term, I'm making it work with just feature films I'm doing. And then long term, the goal is to there's many goals. There's the goal of the Oscar, all that stuff. But
Mhm.
I think the real goal, which everything branches out from that, is financial and creative independence. And what I mean by that is one of the reasons I want to be a producer my whole life is because I want to eventually buy my freedom, sign of my films, and at one point I want to fully finance my own films. And that'll come with just being business minded and having that kind of hand in each of my projects. So yeah, long term, 10 years, 15 years, who knows, which means that I can also be my own boss, because we know that uh direct where our bosses are the investors. So the goal is to pass that.
Right. You want to be able to not say answer anyone, but you want to make sure you're self made and you can make your decisions without needing someone else's okay. Yeah, I understand that completely.
Yeah.
With that being said, now that helps. That's why you're doing. You're going for your business degree, which I think is great because you need that backup plan. I mean, it's just common sense, kind of. But I mean, you can't put all your eggs in one basket. So I think that lens. You must have I have to say this. You must have some really great parents or mentors in your life because you're doing everything right.
I appreciate that. I don't think I'm doing everything right, but I do have I'm very blessed with amazing parents. My dad is the one who really um I think eventually I probably would have went to business school anyways. I knew I didn't want to go to film school, but my dad is the one who said you should go to business school. He was right. I think but I'm not doing it as a backup plan. I don't have a backup plan. I know it's not the smart thing to do, but all my eggs are in this basket. I really only wanted to go to business school because um I just wanted to learn the business side of things. And to be completely honest, I do think now that I've spent a year in business school, I do think you still do most of your learning from actually making the picture and, learning from other people who have done it as well. But yeah, it's a lot of talking about mentors though. I have the greatest mentors in the world. Kind of all the decisions that I've made so far come from either the biography of like Steven Spielberg or George Lucas or Walt Disney. So whatever they did around my age is what I do. So they're my real mentors, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, well, and that's those are the influences that you need, and that's you have to. It's very important to be. I mean, you need the ambition. The ambition comes from somewhere. It comes from those influences, seeing people that did make it. And as I've gotten more closer to a lot of celebrities and gotten an inside peek at the industry, I realized that just like you and I, at some point they were just like you and I, and then they just kept working hard and learning and sacrificing and doing all those old school things that are kind of boring maybe to some people, but they just grinded it out and then it happened. There is a little element of luck, I have to admit, as much as I regretfully don't like admitting it, but a certain amount of luck. But luck does present itself in your life, in different ways, and you'll see you're still a young guy, so you've got a taste of it, but you'll see it more and more as your life progresses. But luck will appear, but you got to be able to, you know, take the opportunity and run with it. So, that's I think that's why a lot of people become successful and why a lot of people don't become successful. So, and I know for sure I've had some really great influences, whether they're celebrities or just in my own life. And you need those. That's the fuel to keep you going. So, and
Yeah.
speaking of which, you mentioned some now, but what are some movies that you really love, or some that you reflect on, and maybe some that really kind of guide you, or maybe some stars that really kind of, or other directors that kind of really motivate you?
Yeah, I have I'll start with directors. I've always really loved my favorite director is Steven Spielberg. Actually making the movie. Steven Spielberg has been my biggest inspiration. That's who I've learned my cinematography from the most. But then in terms of making movies in general, there's also George Lucas. I mean, arguably the greatest entrepreneurial filmmaker of all time. Uh, Walt Disney, I know he's not a director, but I've learned so much from him. Christopher Nolan, James Cameron, to name a few, those are some of my biggest inspirations for many reasons. In terms of my favorite movies, it kind of relates a little bit to those kind of older style of filmmakers. I like an older style of movie. The more it's crazy to call them classic now. They're not really. It's still not too far ago, but movies from the '60s and the '70s and the '80s, the '50s. I love a lot of black and white films, a lot of old musicals. I love the kind of films that are just escapism. I've always been a believer that, you turn on your TV or you ask a friend, what's going on with life. You turn on the news, whatever. Kind of all of it is negative. And most of the films coming out today seem to either be putting a big political message in your face or is about something negative or and I like the idea of going back to those types of films that were so romantic and unrealistic and idealistic and beautiful and uh, that escapism. So that's the type of movie that I love. If that kind of paints a clear picture.
Absolutely. One of my, or two of my favorite, classics, oldies, I mean, you might call them, Casablanca, which is
Oh yeah.
probably one of the best written films ever, and Sunset Boulevard, which big fan of Gloria Swanson. That was just a great movie. So if you haven't watched that, I highly recommend that. And the backstory behind that movie is just as fascinating as the actual movie itself. So, and then you have to study the classics. You have to study the
Yeah.
masters, get back to, and I love watching the whole evolution of how film became what it was, and just how they all went out west and started this dream. It's just incredible. It really is incredible, and that's why I'm also a really big advocate for Hollywood, because and I lived out there, so I seen it, and the fact that the industry is getting kind of decimated and things are upside down, and it's just sad. It really is, because I really do believe that we need to preserve Hollywood as an entity. But of course, we're making films everywhere. You're in Canada, I'm here on the East Coast in Philly. I mean, but at the same time, Hollywood's Hollywood, so we want to protect
Yeah.
the allure. But
Yeah.
all right,
I
so
love
some.
I love the idea of you hear so many of these old stories of, back in the day, not even too long ago, a couple decades ago when everyone was in Hollywood and you all went to lunch at the same spot every day and you could and walk by Spielberg as you're going to get your sandwich, or that kind of community. Hollywood is, the people, but I totally agree with you. I think we need that centralized spot where everyone can go and not to sound ridiculous, but kind of be in that dream world together. I think it's just too bad. It's too bad what's going on right now, and it's too bad that I've heard a lot of people want better incentives as well, and it just hopefully there's a change there, because yeah, it would be great if keeps that sense of that strong community.
Yeah, it's the cinematic Holy Land, and I got the blessing to experience it again back in like 2008. And just like you said, I would walk into Gelson's or I would walk into the Beverly Hills Hotel, and I would run into Jerry Springer or Fabio from the commercials, or I ran into Gary Oldman or John Voight, and literally just running into them at grocery stores around. Very cool. And the Comedy Store and the comedians that were hanging out at that place were tremendous. So yeah, we got to preserve it. But listen, you're doing your part up there, which is fantastic, and I wish you a ton of luck. I think you're going to do fantastic. That I really admire. You're a young guy, and I love what you're about. And stay focused, stay committed, and don't let anything stop you. But in the meantime, let's tell everybody where they can find you. Most importantly, how they can help fund this project.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can kind of find me anywhere by searching out my full name, Augustin Sasarman. I've got my website, and then from there, I'm on the social media and all that stuff. And
So those of you that are watching this on the platforms, you're going to see a link. We'll have all of his links, and I expect you. This is not open for discussion here. I expect you to make sure that you're following him and supporting him, and please contribute to his movie and help him launch his next big project, which is Storyteller. Well, Augustine, you are a young man that I think is going to hopefully get other young people out there more motivated to do something. And just pick up a phone, man. That's all you gotta do. Pick up the phone and just do it, And there is no wrong way or right. We just gotta keep trying, right?
yeah, absolutely. I love that.
All right. Well, with that being said, that's a fantastic look, ladies and gentlemen, at the grit that it takes to build a career from the ground up. And I think everyone watching and listening can take away some serious lessons from Augustine's journey. And we look forward to Storytellers. And it's always inspiring to see young talent such as yourself taking ownership over something that's really creative and helping the industry. All right. So until next time, you've been watching my guest, Augustin Sasarman. I'm Vinny from South Philly. Make sure you're subscribing to our channel, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me on.